morning. Good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure as well as an honor to be here with you this morning in this beautiful city of León. It is a pleasure for me to share with you some of the latest events associated to cybersecurity in Latin America and the Caribbean, and specifically what we are doing at my organization in terms of cybersecurity. We work in three main basic areas. First of all, policy development. We also work with member states of our organization. We ensure that they have policies and national strategies, and also in terms of development of measures to promote trust in cyberspace. We have a working group who will be in charge of looking into this topic and developing and shaping measures to enhance trust in cyberspace. We are also very active in capacity building. We do that primarily through the establishment and enhancing of national certs, also through specific training, including topics such as protection of security of critical infrastructure, response to cyber events, and also initiatives to fight against cybercrime. And we also support the regions through a number of technical studies about the situation of cyber states in the region. We also foster initiatives for awareness raising, and also we carry out a number of measures to encourage young people as well as women to to have a career in cybersecurity. Now I will tell you what we are doing in cybersecurity and the results of some of the latest studies. So it is worth mentioning that it is needed to carry out a more detailed analysis about cybersecurity in Latin America and the Caribbean, and we are trying to fill that gap through an increased number of studies so that we get additional information. For that end, we have signed a number of cooperation agreements with the private sector, even Amazon Web Services, as well as other companies that will help us develop some white papers. I will start off with a study that we produced 2 years ago. It is a study that we carry out together with Trend Micro, aimed at defining the state of critical infrastructure and some of the threats that critical infrastructure organizations face. The participants of this survey were government agencies as well as critical industries, communication, banking, finance, manufacturing, energy and security, amongst others, out of 26 members of the OAS. We surveyed around 600 operators of critical infrastructure. What were the outcomes of that survey? Well, as you can see on the screen, these are some of the outcomes of the study, where we can see that 53% of the interviewed noticed an increase of incidents in their IT system, and 76% claimed that those incidents were more and more sophisticated. These results point at the need to establish better protection and to have better response to events. Also, we can see data pointing at increase of events to critical infrastructure, an increase of 43%. There is also an alarming 31% of people interviewed claimed that they were not sure whether they have been attacked or not. So therefore, a current challenge nowadays is sophistication of attacks. As we can see in the last graph, we see the various different sectors, where we can see that 50% of government organizations, 47% of energy sector company, 44% belonging to the communication sector, and 42% of organizations in the banking and finance sector have been attacked, and their communication have been compromised. Preparation starts off with planning. So here we can see that 52% of those interviewed claim to have response plans to cyber attacks. Only 370% of the organizations have increased their industrial controls and have implemented necessary security measures, which increases the risk of having their devices compromised. However, 69% of organizations claim that they have awareness raising policies in place for their employees. Even though they have these policies in place, not all of them are ongoing policies. The good news is that 68% of interviewed claim that they trust in the government in terms of providing support and help to face up to these threats. Having said that, only 1 out of 5 organizations interviewed, that is to say around 20%, claim to be engaged into active dialogue between the government about the protection of their critical infrastructure. Because critical infrastructure has an impact on everyone, private and public partnerships are essential for the suitable and proper management of cyber attacks, because, well, many of these critical infrastructures are operated by the private sector. Now I'd like to share with you an example in the region about government leadership and cooperation with the private sector for better understanding of the impact of cyber attacks. This has been produced by the Ministry of Technology and Communication of Colombia with the support of the OAS. This report is about the impact of digital security incidents. It was launched in early October, more specifically on the 2nd of October. And this report is the result of cooperation between the private sector and the government of Colombia. As a result of this joint participation, some 1,100 interviews were conducted. Over 500 companies were interviewed as well as 590 entities in the public government. So this research study was carried out during 6 months, and it had a number of stages. There was a pilot stage where the participating entities were asked to implement the instruments in-house with the aim of testing applicability of the terms and conditions used, understanding of the questions asked, as well as the usability and logic of the online instruments. This study allowed identification of vital practices in terms of cybersecurity implemented by the organization, the main incidents, as well as the budget allocated to cybersecurity. So therefore, this study allowed the identification of the impact of digital security incidents on Colombian organizations, both public and private, and it has taken as its base figures from 2016. For instance, a key question with regard to digital security practices is the following: whether there are dedicated people in the organization devoted to digital security. In the private sector, 70% of large companies answered yes, versus over 20% in micro companies. So therefore, this study highlighted the importance of focusing on policies of digital security for companies. The results tell us that big companies tend to implement more security measures than micro companies, and also that national public entities are more concerned about digital security versus local entities and companies. When we are asked the respondents to answer in a scale from 1 to 5 about the main factors that will have an impact on their capacity to provide this digital security, they answered lack of dedicated personnel and lack of budget were claimed or answered as the most important factors, as well as the lack of awareness rating in the employees. Actually, the analysis of the budget allocation, digital security affairs confirmed these concerns amongst the respondents. To summarize, adopting digital security measures are essential not only to deliver protection but also to have a better understanding about the impact of digital incidents in Colombian organizations. Although many organizations claim to be ready for these digital incidents, these very same organizations do not have dedicated personnel dealing with digital events. They often transfer this responsibility to third parties, not to third parties, but to the IT departments in the companies. Those companies that have dedicated personnel to digital security, 55% of the companies answered that they have between 1 or 2 dedicated people. This enhances or reinforces the conclusion that although the companies have recognized the importance of tackling digital events and security issues, they have not responded. They have not implemented any measures. So in terms of investment, only 10% of this 1% that is devoted to digital security is devoted to training. And this is a reason of concern, especially when we see that most of the organizations participated in this study have between 80 and 100% of the employees connected to the internet, and also considering the increased phishing and malware attacks that could target anyone in the organization. The data collected have shown that cyber attacks are more and more sophisticated, whereas the upgrading of human and technological resources to protect this organization, as well as the budget allocated to digital security, are still small and very slow. The severity of the threats and the damage that they cause demand urgent actions and measures where we need a strong collaboration of the private and public sector. Now, Some background about cybersecurity in the 34 OAS states. It is available in www.observatoriociberseguridad.com. This is expected, data are expected to be updated in 2018. So now, very briefly, I will refer to a report that we carried out last year together with the IBD. Title of it is Cybersecurity. Are we ready for it in Latin America and the Caribbean? Last year I gave a presentation on this topic. I will not dwell on it, so very briefly I will summarize some of the key points that were detected in our research study. So here in this slide we can see that we have identified 3 key areas that help us define the level of maturity of a member state in terms of maturity in terms of cybersecurity. Countries that have an initial level of maturity, they are allocated number 1, whereas those with the highest level of maturity are scored number 5. So we have here policy and strategy, culture and society, education, legal framework, and technologies. Technologies and standards. Each of these dimensions deliver a number of indicators so that a nation has an understanding about the level of maturity for each of these indicators. Taking into account this model, we can say that Latin America and the Caribbean countries are at a very early stage of maturity. It is worth noticing that some countries have improved their capabilities in these 5 areas, but still there is a significant work ahead of us. Specifically, we can see that there are still lots of challenges in the region. Many of the member states have started to develop their national strategies in cybersecurity. Later on, I will tell you more about that specific aspect. For several reasons, they have not completed this process. Many countries have not realized the importance of establishing a mechanism that help them identify and protect the critical infrastructures at the national level. Many Latin American and Caribbean countries have not recognized the importance of establishing training opportunities in cybersecurity or having a public awareness raising program for citizens in general. Now I would refer to the development of national strategies in cybersecurity in the member states. Why is it necessary to develop a strategy of this kind? It is also very important to tell you that in 2014 the OAS member countries agreed on developing a comprehensive cybersecurity plan for Latin America. This helped establish the basic guidelines to have a standard general policy in cybersecurity across the Americas. And now we are supporting member states that require our help in the specific development of their respective national plans. Why should they work in this aspect? Well, first of all, because you know that attacks are more and more increasingly sophisticated, because there is an increased need to have a strategic and coordinated response between the different national stakeholders, and also because there is an increased dependence on ICTs and the Internet of Things. So this is the flow where for the development of this strategy. It is made up of 5 steps. It requires joint work with the governments. It also involves national stakeholders through public consultation and through discussion table. It starts off with a technical mission, a visit to the country where we meet up with the different stakeholders. This is followed by a draft strategy that is shared with the different sectors. The OAS and our cybersecurity program contributes to the adoption of this draft strategy that is also shared with the public and other sectors. And then the final stage is the approval stage. So these are the 7 critical stages that national strategy go through. First of all, we have the identification of a person or an organization that may lead the process. Typically, we are talking about high levels of government here. Number 2, we also make a diagnosis aimed at understanding the most urgent needs in cybersecurity in that specific country. Number 3, we short-term and mid-term objectives are set out. Then we identify and involve key actors. We identified a roadmap so that the idea becomes tangible and feasible. We also set out measurable and doable objectives, including monitoring and evaluation techniques. It is highly important that this document is a live document, dynamic document, open to changes and to fine-tuning. And last, we also make a cost estimation of the activities so that it is financially viable. I'm very pleased to confirm that with the help of the OAS, 7 countries in the regions have successfully implemented the national strategy: Colombia, Jamaica, Panama, Paraguay, Costa Rica, Trinidad and Tobago, and Chile. Colombia is an interesting case as it is already developing its 2nd national strategy on cybersecurity. The first time was produced 6 years ago. Now they are in a position to learn from the first initiative, and now they are again into developing this 2nd strategy, and we are also helping them out. It is also a pleasure for me to tell you that other 4 countries are in an advanced stage in the approval of their strategy: Guatemala, Mexico, Argentina, and Dominican Republic. Hopefully very soon they will have the plans and the strategy approved. And we're also working with Honduras, Belize, and Barbados. They have just embarked in this process short ago. So regarding capacity building, we've been actively working in the organization and delivering of regional and local training in terms of management of events, protection of critical infrastructure, forensic analysis, law enforceability, and any mission requested by the member state by us. We are in a position to develop specific training courses to respond to their specific needs. And now I'd like to take advantage of this opportunity to refer to the excellent collaboration that we have with INCIBE. INCIBE has been working and collaborating with us for a long time now. We have taken part in joint activities aimed at promoting the capacity building and training of key stakeholders in Latin America. This event that was held this year in June, the first international forum on gender and cybersecurity. It was a forum that was very welcomed. It was aimed at promoting gender diversity in cybersecurity. Different stakeholders took part in that forum: academia, government, private sector, civil society, where participants had the opportunity to engage in working groups, in roundtables that discussed topics such as job opportunities for young women and also measures to fight against gender-based violence online. It's worth highlighting that the OAS has recently submitted for its consideration to the Global Forum for Cybersecurity an initiative about gender and cybersecurity aimed at creating a more inclusive digital world in collaboration with the government of Spain. Here I would like to refer to the fact that there is a clear gender gap in the field of cybersecurity. Initiatives of this kind, the Cybersecurity Program of the OAA through diversification of gender in cybersecurity will not only contribute to highly qualified personnel in cybersecurity, but also better prepared to deliver cybersecurity solutions. It is also expected that the end users of the internet, and more specifically women, have better access to information and tools to protect themselves against online abuse. Well, finally, the Cybersecurity Program of OAS was offered to 107 officers from Latin America and the Caribbean, 29 women, 78 men from Argentina, Bahamas, Belize, Brazil, altogether 26 countries. These 26 countries took part in the third edition of the summer bootcamp that took place in this beautiful city in July this year. The event lasted for 2 weeks and it was aimed to train participants on the latest techniques against cybersecurity crimes, management of cybersecurity incidents and mechanisms aimed at improving coordination in cybersecurity. This intensive training was aimed at law enforcement agency, specialists of national search, as well as policymakers. The training courses were divided in 2 levels. We have basic and advanced, and 3 different tracks: law enforcement, search, and policymakers. And for the first time ever, we had this a track for policymaking, due to the need of the region to adapt its legal framework to the new challenges in cybersecurity. Well, the third edition of International CyberX, also organized in cooperation with INCIBE and the National Center for Protection of Critical Infrastructure in Spain, had as its objective to strengthen the capacity of incident response team to respond to cybersecurity events as well as to enhance cooperation through a cyber exercise. Altogether, 118 professionals of CERT organized in 65 teams, including private sector, public sector, academia. 54 teams out of the 65 teams came from the OAS member states. These exercises offered not only the opportunity to implement, to practice coordinated response in real time, but also to build trust amongst the different CERTs. This trust is a key aspect to give coordinated response in the face of real cybersecurity events. So these are some of the winners of this CyberX. So Spain and Slovakia were amongst the top ones. Argentina, Colombia and Chile also were one of the top 10 teams. All right, and to summarize, I would like to summarize, as I say, some of the results or milestones that we have achieved up until now. These, as I mentioned before, approved national strategies. At this point in time, we have 16 national CERTs taking place in the network of CERTs. We would like to promote participation of more CERTs in this network. As I mentioned before, we are already we are working on some drafts for national strategies, and considering the great interest that was, the interesting nature of the Colombia report, we would like other Latin American and Caribbean countries to follow Colombia's suit. I'm also very proud to say that we encourage participation of more than 600 people this year in our cybersecurity events. We are very much focused and interested in promoting this participation in cybersecurity. We also facilitated the participation of 54 teams in CyberX. And we have also promoted and enhanced training of young people and of future generations. And they will be in charge of fighting against cybersecurity attacks in the future. So we have also been very successful in hosting, together with Microsoft and other private partners, some webinars about different topics where we had the participation of more than 5,000 people. I hope that this general summary highlights the efforts made by the OAS, CITE, and of our cybersecurity program. It is a pleasure and an honor to be with you today. I will be very happy to take any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Perdón.
Sí, me había una pregunta para ti. Sí, el chico
Hola, buenos días. Gracias por la charla con tantas estadísticas.
Good morning. Thank you very much for your presentation with so many facts and figures. So you mentioned that 78% of the companies that were interviewed said that their attacks have been sophisticated, are more sophisticated now. Can you hear me well? No, sorry, I cannot hear you well. So one of your statistics, in one of your reports, you have found out that 78% of the companies said that the sophistication of their attacks has increased. So who was interviewed and who determined the level of sophistication? Who were the people responsible? Yeah, who determines the level of sophistication of the attacks? Well, I just don't have information about those involved. We just gather information. We gather information from companies and from different sectors. Just to hear their opinion and their feel about the attacks they suffered and whether they were in a position, they were ready to fight them and to mitigate them, but I cannot specify more about it. Good morning. Please, would you anticipate next initiatives in terms of knowledge transfer of Spanish experts? Knowledge. So, from public area and from corporations. So, to see whether the Spanish industry could help enhance cybersecurity in Latin America and the Caribbean. Precisely, exactly. And this is one of the reasons why we appreciate so much our cooperation with INCIBE, because the Latin America and the Caribbean region can significantly benefit from the large experience of Spain and the private sector. And one of the reasons why we made a significant effort to take part in the events organized in Spain. And it is just precisely because of that, to have that for experts to meet with each other and to share information and experiences. In the slides that I showed you, I tried to tell you about the effort that we make in bringing representatives from governments and the private sector here to Spain to facilitate that exchange of ideas and experiences, and also to work together in technical reports, in research studies. From here to 2019, we will be carrying out 8 different technical reports in different sectors, primarily focused on critical infrastructure. I could not tell you right now the role to be played by Spain. I'm making notes of your question, and perhaps we could strengthen that cooperation. Thank you very much.